All opinions expressed on any program are those of the producer and are persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of DCTV. All producers and guests appearing on programs provide information and opinions based on information they consider to be reliable. DCTV does not affirm the completeness and accuracy. All DCTV members agree to adhere to DCTV's statement of compliance and are participants in a community medium forum where they're exercising their freedom of speech.
Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Hudis. This show is a series that has been coming to you from DCTV since 2015 in a weekly program called the Network of Global Corporate Control. Today's program is called Stay Calm, People. Thank you to DCTV, to Carmen Stanley, Project Director, to Maurice Jackson, Studio Director, and to Crochet Starnes, Audio and Prompter. This is the first live segment since April 2nd. DCTV was closed last Tuesday night for Emancipation Day. We are at a fork in the road. The Banking Cartel wants us to choose a road leading to World War III. We are going to take the other road to peace. The way to peace is by getting rid of the corruption in the world's paper money. My job is to keep on reminding you that we need to get rid of the corruption in the world's paper money. The global currency reset is how we are getting rid of the corruption in the world's paper money. Let's start off with Ferdinand Marcos's prayer to the United States.
For I know that as I have said in many a speech before my own people and before the world, fate and destiny has decreed that the United States of America be the trustee of modern civilization against the threat of a possible second dark ages. And America cannot fail. And therefore, we, the Filipino people, come and bring to you a prayer that God, in His divine providence, may grant you guidance, strengthen both your heart and hand, so that that hand may be strong on the lever of power and save our humanity.
Ferdinand Marcos is involved because he was José Rizal's lawyer. José Rizal was a national hero in the Philippines who rose to the rank of superior general in the Society of Jesus, which is the Jesuits. That is how come José Rizal and Ferdinand Marcos established the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund for the deposit of the wealth of the world. All of the world's monetary gold, gemstones, artworks, and bonds worth $2 quadrillion owed by the central bankers were deposited at the World Bank and International Monetary Fund in a trust called the Global Debt Facility at the end of World War II. The Global Debt Facility, these are fancy words for the trust that is now harnessed for a peaceful transition called the Global Currency Reset. You can read more about José Rizal at a link that I've put in the teleprompter, and I will be uploading that this evening on YouTube. YouTube and its disinformation agents have been trying very hard to get our audience confused and riled up. YouTube is owned by Google, and Google was created by the Central Intelligence Agency. The CIA is working for the Banking Cartel and is located in Switzerland. The CIA's bureau in Langley, Virginia, is only a branch office. The CIA is not working for the security of the United States. On the contrary, the CIA is working very hard to bring down the United States through the unconstitutional Federal Reserve notes. Last week, I uploaded a video on YouTube, and I put a link to some documents showing you how the CIA tried to invalidate the global debt facility. Well, the CIA failed. We nixed the CIA's attempt to invalidate the global debt facility containing the world's wealth and the world's monetary gold reserves. The world's wealth remains where José Rizal and Ferdinand Marcos put it, with the Board of Governors in the global debt facility. During this month, the World Bank and International Monetary Fund held their spring meetings. On behalf of the Board of Governors, who are in charge of the global debt facility, I issued the minutes for these meetings, and I sent them to the New York, Tokyo, and Washington embassies, and I posted them in my social media. These minutes confirm our agreement to replace the corrupt, worthless paper money with local currencies issued by villages and towns, and with national currencies out of gold. There have been no dissents from these minutes. And I'm showing you in the teleprompter the tweet and the link to the minutes that were written and approved. And you can also see that there's a return receipt from the New York mission of the United States to the United Nations. The global currency reset to end the black nobility's reign of corruption. That was what I called that tweet. A well-informed group in America, including the loyal military, who have been working together with the joint U.S.-Japan Committee under the Status of Forces Agreement, is ready to join with the Coalition for the Rule of Law on the Board of Governors that was predicted by the power transition model that came to the World Bank from the United States Department of Defense in 2004. At the beginning of this series, I told you that we could tell if we were achieving our goal when you would start seeing through the lies in other media. We confronted Kos Janssen of Silver Dollar in the March 7, 2017 DC TV segment. Kos Janssen told you that he had received the copy of an audit of the Federal Reserve Bank in a Freedom of Information Act request. I said, agents of the banking cartel are now lying and trying to manufacture an audit of gold held by the Fed. There is no audit of gold held by the Fed. The Fed has no gold. The Fed purchased the gold which it returned to Germany on the open market. The Fed is now bankrupt from the $270 trillion worth of bonds which it issued in the 1930s, and interest has been compounding. The Treaty of Versailles bonds held by the Global Debt Facility are now worth over $2 quadrillion. I recorded the Fed's debt with the 11 secretaries of state of the states in which the Federal Reserve Banks are located. Kos Janssen's Freedom of Information Act request is bogus. Silver Dollar and Kos Janssen didn't try to defend their lies after I pointed out that there was only a paper audit. The reason why this segment is called Stay Calm People is because the bankers are trying to rile everyone up with divide and conquer tactics. Once you know the truth and what is real, there's every reason to stay calm. The world's military powers are listening to our broadcasts. They're very interested in being paid with real gold and they are not so interested in surrendering unilaterally with fake paper money. Today, an Air Force vet retweeted what I told Secretary Hagel on October 19, 2014, a month before Secretary Hagel was forced to resign. I told Secretary Hagel to court-martial John Reimer for aiding the enemy, and I also outed a high-level agent working for the banking cartel. I've been telling you that the world's military powers are in a big coalition to end the corruption in the world's paper money. I've been telling you that Donald Trump is not the commander-in-chief of the United States, that he is a treasonous liar, and that he was never in office because the United States Constitution of 1789 was not in effect, and the Electoral College was bogus. Donald Trump is play-acting because he could not be in office if the Constitution is not in effect. I've been telling you that there are flybys nearly every single day to show me that the United States Armed Forces remain loyal to their oaths of office to defend the United States Constitution and the people who live here in this country. The Joint Chiefs of Staff are not going to bring this country down with the corrupt bankers. I'm following the National War College's power transition model that is 90 to 95% accurate. The bankers are trying to confuse you with lies. Let's start out with the basic building block, us. Who are we? The bankers own the media, and they're trying to tell us lies about who we are. I caught the New Yorker at it, and you can see in an article that they're saying that we're not sovereign at all. And what I tweeted was, the truth about who we are resonates. And the New Yorker said influence is a challenge to sovereignty, both political and personal. To admit to being influenced is to give up the attractive idea that as individuals or societies, we are entirely self-contained. Well, there's a book that's coming out, and we'll be talking about who we are and whether we're sovereign. It'll talk about our brains and how our brains function, and also how our hearts function. A history of the influencer from Shakespeare to, I'm just reading from the New Yorker, and what the New Yorker said. For centuries, influencers have been forcing us to admit an uncomfortable truth. We are neither entirely self-determining nor self-contained. Well, the New Yorker is not telling you the truth. They're owned by the bankers, and they're telling you lies. And what I said to the New Yorker, this is another lie that the banking cartel would have you believe. Not so. Our brains and our hearts are much more than the banking cartel admits. And we'll come back to this again. The network of global corporate control is a big conglomerate that owns and controls many companies on the capital markets and issues the world's paper currencies. 3 mathematicians at the Federal Institute of Technology, Vitali Glatfelder and Battiston, proved the existence of the network of global corporate control by looking at who owned the 43,000 companies traded on the world's capital markets. They found that the same directors were appointed to the boards and that the network of global corporate control had done this so that they exercised 10 times the control that they were actually entitled to. I told you that we're in a dialogue and that it's our relationship that matters. I started noticing that things were very corrupt and that there were serious lies when I was doing my job in the World Bank's legal department. The world's central bankers hate the World Bank and IMF because they know full well why the World Bank and IMF were created. I've told you that the conference that began the World Bank and IMF in 1944 voted to close the Bank for International Settlements, the BIS. That is the organization of 60 central banks. And that is what we, together with the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF, are now doing. I got my information about how the conference that began the World Bank and IMF voted to close the Bank for International Settlements from Valentin Katasanov, who is an eminent Russian economist. How are we going to close the central banks? These central banks, including the United States Federal Reserve, owe us, that is, the trust managed by the World Bank and IMF called the Global Debt Facility, $2 quadrillion. I've recorded this debt with the Secretaries of State in the states where the Federal Reserve banks are located. The Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago is where the Federal Reserve Bank's main office is located because Jesse White thought he could invalidate the lien that I put on the Federal Reserve Bank in Chicago. All of the countries have already told Jesse White that he was out of line, and he had no authority to do that. Jesse White is now bankrupt under a commercial lien that I and the Global Debt Facility are holding. Last week, Jesse White tried invalidating the commercial lien that we have on his property. Jesse White is worried, and he's breaking ranks with the banking cartel. Jesse White is worried about reality, and now there's going to be a roll-in.
Black nobility. One of the things that has just happened recently is that there is a man named Jesse White who was part of this corruption. What he did was he decided to try to undo everything, and he sent me a letter just very recently, just yesterday, and what I did was I responded to that letter. And what also Jesse White was trying to do was, and I don't want to get too technical because this will be boring for you, but one of the ways that the bankers have managed to fool everybody is they took the regular law, the legal system, and they turned it into something called maritime law, which is what the bankers and the companies use. And what I did was I learned from people that there's a different legal approach, which is called the common law, and I used the common law to bankrupt many of the agents of the banking cartel. And so I bankrupted Jesse White, and Jesse White was trying to undo what I did, and he sent me a letter, which you can read. That's one of the things, that's one of the ways we know that we are now ready, we meaning all of the people on earth, that we're now ready to start taking over and replacing all of this corruption in the money. Because what Jesse White did was he undid the, he didn't want to be bankrupted, and so he sent a letter saying that everything that I had done wasn't valid. And of course what I've been doing is I've been using the common law. And I learned this from somebody who then tried to turn around and take over. What he did, there's something called a commercial lien. That's a way of bankrupting somebody who's corrupt. And so what, his name was Bruce Lewis, what the expert on common law commercial liens did was he tried to put his name on all of the world's property. And when I saw that, I realized that no, this man was actually something that we call, what's the word? One of the reasons, of course, that I use teleprompters is because when I'm on the hot spot, sometimes there's a word that I want that I can't find. When somebody is trying to make you think that they're fighting corruption, and it turns out, the word that I was looking for is controlled opposition. Yes, Jesse White is certainly an agent, but Bruce Lewis was something called controlled opposition. And there's a lot of controlled opposition, including Julian Assange. These are people who will tell you a lot of truth mixed up with lies, and then they're hoping that they can fool you. So what we're going to have to do in going forward is we're going to have to learn how to distinguish between the lies that are being given to us by the controlled opposition and what's actually true. And
you can see readily from this that time is not on the side of the banking cartel. Internet Archive has been censored, so I just uploaded last year's tweet on Scribd. It's time to start implementing the global currency reset. People, stay calm. I realize that this official letterhead, that's what I use for my tweets, of the World Bank's Tokyo office and of the Global Debt Facility must be boring a lot of people that want to know what's going on, and they distrust the world's officials. I use this letterhead as shorthand to tell people that we, the beneficiaries of the trust containing the world's monetary gold reserves and other assets, which is all of humanity, we're cleaning up the corruption in the world's money system. I answer your questions and prove every single statement. I've proven my authority to speak for the members of the Board of Governors of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund many times. As agreed, following World War II, all of the assets of the world are managed by the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF. In my social media and in the series on DCTV, I'm letting the world's people know that they are all ending the state capture of the world's governments and other institutions in a global currency reset. This is the exact opposite of the new world order, because the World Bank and IMF have no right to interfere in the political activities of the member countries. The banking cartel has been trying to dominate the World Bank and IMF, and they've not succeeded. I overrule all attempts to steal the world's assets. People, stay calm. The insolvent banking cartel wants to provoke you during the global currency reset. And now I'm going to speak extemporaneously for a few minutes. One of the things I wanted to tell you is what happened when I tried to deposit a rather large check at the Bank Fund Staff Federal Credit Union, where I have my checking account. And by the way, the Global Debt Facility also has an account at that bank. And as you know, all the banks are one. So what happened, this was on the 30th of March. I went there to deposit the check, and the branch chief refused to allow me to deposit the check. Why? She claimed that the amount was not, that there had been it wasn't very clear. My mother had written the check. It was a gift to me. And my mother is 95, so her handwriting's not so great. And so what happened after I took the check back, because I wanted to get it replaced, and I ultimately did get it replaced. But what happened is when I went to my doctor's office, somehow, I don't know how, that check left my purse and landed on the garage floor, and then somehow the garage attendant knew which doctor I had gone to visit. There are many offices in that building. And one of the assistants to my doctor called me up to tell me that she had my check. And I told her to rip it up. And then I redeposited the amount, and then I used that to pay off. I had some pretty large American Express debt. And when I paid that off, I had a conversation with American Express about how much interest they were entitled to charge. And I asked them whether they thought that that was too much interest. And then I said, when they were deciding whether or not to calculate the interest the way they were calculating, they probably should take into account the fact that the banks are actually all bankrupt because they owe us $2 quadrillion. And since all of the banks are interconnected, I said, this is a very important conversation to have, and I'm going to be reporting it to the other people. So when we upload this video, you can also weigh in with your comments, because if you've been looking at some of the comments in the archives, you can see that, yes, there is definitely there is a coalition that's socking it to the bankers. We are now head-to-head with the bankers. And it's not a coincidence, but many of the social media, there's a lot of interference now. And in next week's segment that we're pre-recording today, we'll be talking about some of the commotion that's going on. But the main thing is that the bankers are trying very hard to provoke World War III, and they're not succeeding. They tried it in the past with a first nuclear strike against Russia. They tried with a nuclear bomb that was detonated in 2013 off the coast of South Carolina. And you see, this isn't working. It's just not working. And the reason why it's not working is because there is another reality, and that reality is the one that we're talking about now. And you can see by what we prove, and all of what we say we prove, you can see that this reality really does overrule the lies of the bankers. I'm going to be showing you as well this fake audit that Coase Janssen was talking about. I can tell you the technical details, which is that in 2012, I looked at the audit and the language on the audit. It was just a paper audit, and then the bankers went and reissued what they considered to be a Freedom of Information Act, which under the Freedom of Information Act, they were referring to an entirely different audit. And you can't have two separate audits like that. One was a lie. Now, are we ready to do the outro or not? Looks like we've got a few more times. Well, what you can see is fake news, because the bankers own the newspapers, not just the mainstream media, but also the alternative media. And what you read in their rags is what they want to manipulate you with. They're trying to provoke you. And so what you have to realize is that this is propaganda. I want to thank you for listening to another segment of the Network of Global Corporate Control. We have discussed in today's segment how the world's wealth in the global debt facility that was held secret inside the World Bank and International Monetary Fund for over 50 years is coming out in a global currency reset to replace paper currencies with currencies out of gold. We've been talking about the truth about who we are. The first thing is to keep an open mind. Until next week, I'm your host, Karen Udis.